Simply Science, Genetic Traits. Meet the Gonzalez family. They're going to help us take a look at inherited traits. Inherited traits are characteristics that are passed from parents to their offspring or children. The first inherited trait that we're going to look at is the ability to roll your tongue. You receive two genes from your parents, one from your mother and one from your father. Those genes may be dominant or recessive. We're going to use a capital T to represent the dominant gene, the gene that gives you the ability to roll your tongue, and a lowercase t to represent the recessive or no tongue roll gene. Here are the possible combinations that you can receive from your parents. Capital T, or two dominant genes. If you have this combination, you can roll your tongue. One capital T and one lowercase t, you still have one dominant gene, so you can roll your tongue. And finally, two lowercase t's. If you received two recessive genes from your parents, you cannot roll that tongue. Mrs. Gonzalez can roll her tongue, so she has a dominant gene for tongue rolling. Mr. Gonzalez cannot roll his tongue, so he has two recessive genes. I wonder what that means for Anastasia and Nicholas. Anastasia has a great tongue roll. She received a dominant gene from her mother and a recessive gene from her father. Nicholas can roll his tongue too. Being able to roll your tongue is a dominant trait. He received a dominant gene from his mother and a recessive gene from his father. Here are more inherited traits that are fun to look at. Number 1, eye color. Number 2, earlobes. Are they attached or unattached? And number 3, hand clasping. When you fold your hands, which thumb is on top? Let's take a look at the Gonzalez family's eye color. Mrs. Gonzalez has brown eyes. Mr. Gonzalez has brown eyes too. What color eyes do you think their children will have? Let's take a look. Anastasia has green eyes. As brown is the dominant eye color, Anastasia must have inherited two recessive genes. How about Nicholas? What color do you think his eyes will be? His eyes are brown. Nicholas has at least one dominant gene for brown eyes. Now, let's check out their earlobes. Do they have earlobes that are attached or unattached? Mrs. Gonzalez has earlobes that are attached. Mr. Gonzalez has earlobes that are attached. Anastasia's earlobes are unattached. Nicholas has earlobes that are attached. So which do you think is the dominant gene? The gene for attached earlobes or the gene for unattached earlobes? I'm betting most of you said the gene for attached earlobes is dominant. But guess what? The dominant gene is for unattached earlobes. Now, fold your hands. Which thumb is on top? If you have your left thumb on top, you have a dominant gene for hand clasping. Let's see if anyone in the Gonzalez family has the dominant gene for hand clasping. This is Mr. Gonzalez. Look, his left thumb is on top. He has the dominant gene for hand clasping. Mrs. Gonzalez has the dominant gene for hand clasping too. Anastasia has the dominant gene for hand clasping. I wonder about Nicholas. His right thumb is on top. Nicholas has two recessive genes for hand clasping. So how about you? Do you have 2 recessive genes? Or do you have the dominant gene for hand clasping? So now let's review. For a dominant trait to be present, you had to receive at least 1 dominant gene for that particular trait from one of your parents. But for a recessive trait to be present, you had to receive 2 recessive genes for that particular trait, 1 from each parent. For an inherited trait that is passed from parent to child to be present, the gene for the dominant characteristic must be present. Wow, that's a lot of difficult words. Let's break it down.